Ellen Fox, I believe yesterday, Christy, you might correct me, yesterday was being moved to a rehab facility. And Sue Ann is actually able to stay there, live with him during rehab. So that's awesome. Don't have any awards and recognitions. Now comes Heather.
Kate, fellow Rotarians, I have on the table a goal for United Way. So we have this event coming up on February 12th. And there's registration forms if you would like to submit a team or be a lane sponsor. So lane sponsors are $100. A team is $150. And we also have a raffle ticket. If you want any, you can see me later on today for a Yeti cooler filled with alcohol and other goodies under $20 each. So the slots are filling up fast. Again, it's February 12th, so just fill out the form and you can give it to me or email it to me later. And if you put a team in, we're also giving away the front row block party. So your team will get one of these as well. Thank you. Come on.
Just a reminder that your gala is February 26th. If you are unable to attend, please let Kim, Amber, or I know. And if you are unable to attend, but someone is using your ticket, we also need to know that. We're still, of course, looking for $100 sponsors, so we appreciate you work with a business or your own business or yourself personally. We need to sell some of those to help make the event successful. In my email this week, you saw district conference registration is open. I hope you guys will consider, for you newbies, it is a great way to learn more about Rotary. For all of us that have been, it's just a really good time. Blake, I'm sure, has some stories that she probably can't talk about. But it is a really nice event. It's great to see what we actually do, not only as our club, but as Rotary as a whole. So I hope you will consider signing up for that. Ken's looking for a roommate also for that. Yeah.
President Katie, fellow Rotarians. As the past president, it's my important job to chair the board nominations committee. And I've had conversations with some of you, emails, phone calls, and any of you have. At any rate, we do have some interest. So I'm pleased to announce these following order. Nominations committee has the following agreements for the 22-23 Rotary year, and that is for past president Katie Toole. First time you've said that. President Rory Glasscock, President-elect Ken Evans, seated at the head table there. For incumbent board members, Ken Evans, Holly Rudnizer, Chrissy McMullen Goodwin. Chrissy's up as president. Where is she? All right. And new board members, drum roll please. Lizzie Lewis. Congratulations, Lizzie, and thank you. And Amanda Slate. Congratulations, Amanda. Thank you. All right. All right. For our club bylaws, nominations may now be taken from the floor for board nominees.
Hold everybody raise your
Going
hand.
once. Going twice.
I think John Barry raised his hand.
Did you just click on? All right. Hearing none, could I have a motion to place these names in nomination?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second? Thank you. All right, thank you. Voting will take place following the club meeting on February 25th. And will be conducted electronically as we have for the past couple of years. Look for more information on those nominees in the Skyline.
Thank you. Lizzie and Amanda's bios will be running in the Skyliner for the next couple of weeks. So you can make sure you know about them. We'd like to report those are wonderful candidates. And thank you guys for being willing to run. Happy dollars.
I'm happy to hear you all. I'm in the toilets. We're probably cold.
Jeremy, you got a couple.
spring coming in 59 days.
Happy for public work folks through the road. Happy it's not gonna snow. All right.
Thank you. And the attendance report. Thank you. So our program today is by our own Dr. Meltvedt, and we're going to figure out how to get him up here.
Wow.
He's doing good so far. Yeah. So do I push share screen first?
I don't know, you have to have somebody.
I know, we looked at them.
Oh. Yeah, I think.
Click on it.
Click on, yeah, the bottom one, yeah. Go to, just like you would normally. The slide, yeah. Uh-oh. There.
Okay, well, I see it's up there. All right, gotcha.
Yeah, it'll just show you the next slide, I think, on that.
All right, can you hear me? All right. Okay. I just want to kind of bring you up to date on what I've been able to figure out and from my own experience working in the hospital all the time lately. And dealing with, I don't deal as much directly with COVID patients as my colleagues do that I work with. But I do consult and do surgery on COVID patients. So I do have contact, but I don't treat it directly. I'm not the one treating it, running the ventilator. I'm not that, but I know that a lot of those people are my colleagues and friends. So what I want to bring to you is what's the latest and some of my impressions working lately in the latest surge, okay? Because it is significant. So Omicron, that's what we're talking about right now. This is a two-dimensional view of mutations. How different are they? Okay. You can see where Delta is at the bottom down there. The original ancestral, we call it ancestral, it's only been 2 years, we call it the ancestral strain, is the Wuhan strain. Okay, so that's where it all started. Those are mutations around it, and the distance is the number of mutations. Okay. Omicron came out of nowhere. Okay. Yeah. It was not like any of the others. It's different. It's not just an improved Delta. It is its own thing. Okay.
Do you hit the arrow key? Should. Or hit the mouse pad. After 24 months of this, we'll eventually get it. Got it.
Oh, here, wait, let me try this. Okay, all right. So this is a spike protein. It is an actual complete model based on a computer simulation of every single atom in a COVID viral. It's about 1 million. And the computer simulates it, and they can actually even move it through time and space. So far left, ancestral strain. Middle, I just looked at the top and the side. Middle is Delta, and right is Omicron. All those colored things are the mutations. They're the differences. Look how much difference there is in the spike protein on Omicron versus Delta. Ancestral strain. Very different. And this matters. Okay, we're going to talk about how it matters. Symptoms, they're different. On the ones that are more to the right are Omicron, one more to the left are Delta. Notice sore throat, fever, cough, a little bit more common. Diarrhea, not the same. Loss of smell and taste, not so common, right? It was common in Delta, not common in Omicron. More like a cold, right? So the symptoms more like a cold for Omicron. And it doesn't give the diarrheal symptoms and the nausea and vomiting that the previous versions had. The reason for this is that those mutations that you saw do two things. One is and we're going to talk about this a little more too, they evade our antibodies that we made previously. Okay, they're different enough that they're evading some of the antibodies from previous infections and vaccinations to some degree. And it doesn't have the same affinity, not that it's zero affinity, but the same affinity for lung and GI tissue that the previous versions had. So more for mucosa, upper respiratory. Doesn't mean it doesn't cause the other areas, but less chance. Okay, this is current. Cases per day in the US as of this morning. You can see we're hopeful that that little down thing right there is a trend, right? But look at the previous Delta rate in comparison, right? This thing has been far worse in terms of generating cases. Fortunately, it does seem more mild because we're not seeing nearly as many deaths. But it's not totally. Okay. These are deaths and hospitalizations compared to the Delta rate in the US as of this morning. As you can see, the death rate is still rising. That is almost all Omicron. Omicron now is over 90% of the United States in the US. And on the right are the hospitalizations. The light pink are hospitalizations, the dark pink are ICU beds. You can see that we've passed hospitalizations with Delta, and we're about the same in the ICU. So Omicron is still bad. It's just that it's not quite as bad as true. However, since we're seeing so many more cases, we end up still seeing a lot of sick people. We actually passed the highest number of COVID patients in Valley Health System hospitals about a week ago from the entire, the highest number in the hospital at one time.
Question or one way?
Oh, no, you can answer the three.
So, what I've read, and when you read stuff, the article you brought up too, but those who are dying, I heard that they have a hybrid combination of the Delta and Omicron variant, and that's what
Say that again.
they have a combination like a hybrid.
No, it's not true.
Where it's
It's one virus that takes over any given person. They're not competing the same person.
Okay, yeah, so that's.
One wins out.
Yeah.
This is COVID. As of this morning, this is COVID in the 5 Valley Health hospitals. Includes ER beds. That left one is, of course, the Delta peak that was back in September. This is the current. We're still hopeful that this means it's coming down, but in every couple of days it bounces back up again. And this has consequences. The consequence is that at Warren, we're having times when over half our beds are filled with patients. We don't have room for anything. We have our ERs full, and I come in the mornings where the ER is 7 or 8 people in the ER are people waiting to get in the ER. So guess what? ER staff has to take care of it. Okay? We're stretched. Staff is stretched. So staff end up staying over, working longer shifts. They're tired. Everybody at the hospital right now seems overwhelmed. It's been very stressful. This particular peak right now has been real stressful. And we're holding on to patients at our hospital that we might have transferred elsewhere in the past, as there are no beds anywhere else. There's no beds at Inova, there's no beds at UVA, there's no beds at Winchester.
Bob, how many employees did you lose because of the vaccine mandate?
Not many. We lost a couple nurses. we didn't lose any doctors. And we lost 7 MAs at one. I will tell you that most of the ones that said at first they weren't going to get vaccinated got vaccinated. So there are a couple, but only a few that did get the religious exemption.
So of these beds and use of the hospital, and you're gonna get to it, tell me, but how many of them are vaccinated versus unvaccinated patients?
Yeah, good point. So the last time I heard an estimate of that, it was of the ones in, I think it was in Winchester that were in the hospital, either in the ICU or in the hospital. 88% were unvaccinated, 12% were vaccinated, 1% were boosted. So you can see where that's going. I mean, obviously vaccination helps a lot, especially with Omicron, it seems, and boosting helps an awful lot. And we'll talk a little bit more about
Why don't we talk more in the future about health instead of, health and wellness? How do we, a lot of these folks that are in trouble have had underlying issues like obesity.
it. Sure.
Why
Or
don't
age.
we have a promotion and campaign where we tell people what we need to do to get healthy,
Well, that's part of what overall public health ought to be, right?
Right.
And we talked about this before, we talked about it with smoking, we talked about it with everything, that there are a lot of risk factors to life. And certainly, COVID has pointed this out, right? But I will tell you that young people and healthy people still get sick. There are still young healthy. Just to show you again that this is the South Africa experience where we first saw Omicron, so that's why it's more recent, it's more full data. Notice the death rate there is not nearly as high as it was with Delta, but it still does go up. And so it's still a serious thing, but certainly not. These are the pediatric from England, which also competitive for us. These are the pediatric hospitalizations. Total number of cases, 0 to 19 is the orange, and total hospitalizations are the black. So again, still significant, right? People still get sick. And we're seeing that kids are getting sick. And this is the staffing shortages across the nation. Everybody.
How many kids have died of COVID?
I don't have that for you. I didn't look that up. There are children that have died from COVID, but I don't have.
Do they have comorbidity or?
I'm sure that immunocompromised always fare the worst. Sure. And so any kids that have had cancer, that kind of thing are sort of going to fare worse than the kids that are not. Right. Is it? I think again, the way to think of this, I think more is probabilistic. Okay. How probable is COVID around where you are? How probable is you're going to get it? There's going to be case, and we'll talk more about this on time and amount and your own immune system, right? But it's still a probability. Doesn't mean that you're going to get it if you have those 4 negative things, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get it if you don't have it, because it's a probability. Maybe it's much less that you'll get it if you're healthy, but it's not 0, or that you'll get sick if you're healthy, but it's not 0. You see? That just gives the timeline on how it works. I don't, we won't go over this, but just that a lot is involved in the pathogenesis of this once the virus gets inside. Once the virus gets entry, it starts the inflammatory pathways. The cytokines down there in the lower left, you've heard us talk about cytokine storm, which is if they get overdone, that's what ends up causing a lot of the lung damage and the people on the ventilator and deaths. And then on the far right is, of course, who ends up with long COVID, where the inflammatory system just doesn't want to shut down. But there are people that, and this is kind of interesting data, I thought. These are soccer players in Europe. They did not have long COVID. They just got COVID and went to but they didn't do it. Look at it. So what's interesting about this, I think, is that people that are playing at the top, the top of their performance, they are affected for a long period of time. It isn't just a week or 2 week illness. Look what number passes for 90 minutes. It stays down for, gosh, a long time, over 225 days. They don't get back to normal very fast. And these aren't the ones that are complaining of long COVID. It's a significant illness. And I'm just trying to build that case. It is still a significant illness. So we still need to take it seriously. They did a study.
I want to just, so those who appear to be at, they get COVID, the residual is that they still have a long period of the byproduct or the symptoms. Because of it.
Well, it affects them.
Yeah.
They may not feel symptoms anymore, but if you look at their performance, it isn't quite what it was. They may think they're back to normal, but and this is another one. So I think this was stopping. Just they decided to look at people 9 months out, whatever. And let's do some tests. Let's see if they're affected. They match them to age match and controls. There's still some respiratory, cardiac, vascular, and renal system effects that far out. They don't feel it, but it's there. So it still does affect you for a period of time.
What causes COVID brain?
It has to do with changes in some cells in the brain. I did not look into that. I'm sorry. There are actually some changes in structure of the brain around certain brain cells.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I had COVID brain.
Yeah, it's a real thing. You're absolutely right. It's a real thing, but I don't think it's just oxygen. It's not just oxygen. There's something else going on, and they've done some research at it, but I didn't.
I don't have it anymore. So
Well, this, if you look at people that have more severe, to the bottom, asymptomatic, mild, moderate, high, extreme disease, okay? This is a score of cognitive ability at executive functioning level afterwards. Just speaking to what you just said. There are effects. The more severe the disease is, the more you're in the ICU, whatever, the more you're going to end up with problems like that.
So do they ever, like the athletes, do they ever return to their,
We're hoping so.
to their normal?
So we don't have enough data yet to say how fast or much they, yes, I think most people are going to return.
Okay, I didn't know if there was a time bomb later on, you know.
Well, there is this long COVID thing, and I don't know what to tell you about that. That is stuff that goes on.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's a minority of people.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what's the ratio of people developing long COVID?
It's small, but I can't tell you the numbers.
Okay.
This is more to say that, yes, that's what even in fairly well vaccinated countries with Omicron. Those are so long COVID. So far, those are the symptoms that people have found in long COVID. They just wanted to throw that out there and say, wow, there's a lot that goes on.
So Bob, how come the medical community seem to ignore therapeutics? I mean, certainly the national.
Well, we're going to get to
We
towards.
can talk about it.
So we'll talk more about stuff. But-
Okay.
And pediatrics, 10% developed long COVID. And the previous, prior to Omicron. And the point is that if Omicron was only 1%, still there are so many cases, we're still going to see a lot of long COVID problems.
Yes, great young player, nearly won.
Other effects.
Already had 10
This
professional
is
tournaments.
perinatal mortality. This one's out of stuff as well.
I think we'd all love to see
So
Lexi
they have
win.
a lot of really big, really analyzed.
Every especially especially
So-
after what we're an Olympic club,
That middle one is important.
noticeably absent.
Perinatal mortality, which is that's a
Fever gets
right before birth.
Hey, Alan, can you mute yourself?
win the Chevron Championship, maybe the icing.
Those are the rates
But I think
on the bottom that are basically the basic rates. The one that goes up there is a woman who develops, who gets COVID, not vaccinated, and gets it within 28 days of her perinatal mortality.
Of the 30 events last year,
So,
13.
so how does it spread? Well, it's droplets. We used to think, oh, you know, surfaces, not so much. It's droplets. And it's really airborne transmission of those tiniest of droplets. That's what really spreads. They're tiny. And they spread out well beyond, there's the big droplets, which have more virus, of course, that are the ones that drop. They're the ones, you know, the drops within a few feet. That's why we say, oh, 3 to 6 feet, they're more protected. But the little tiny ones spread outward, and they can last up to 2 hours. So again, I found the computer simulation again of this virus in a droplet, in the smallest of the droplets, which can hold only 1 virus. So there it is. There's the spike proteins, right? Then that droplet floating around in the air. It actually has a lot of other stuff in that droplet. These are mucins and proteins in the lung, and that's all the proteins and junk from the lung thrown in. That's what a droplet looks like. This is the droplet that when you talk, when you breathe, goes out into the air and kind of spreads across the room. Okay. So, while the big droplets and the higher concentrations are nearby, the large, those little tiny droplets can go out across the entire room. I think this one was just, I wanted to throw in that this may be out of order a little bit, but that's the Warren County. Those are the Warren County rates right now, as of this morning. It's dropping, which is pretty cool. But there's still quite. We're getting what, about 40 cases a day, right now. We were up to about 1 peak per 147 cases a day of newly diagnosed. And these people that are coming in and being tested, whatever, you know, they're really that aren't right.
Yeah, can I just confirm something I had heard too, that the big difference between Omicron and Delta is that the Delta would go into the lungs where the Omicron
Right.
settles
So
in the
we're
throat.
talking about the receptors
Yeah.
differences, and that the lungs and the GI tract have a little bit different receptor setup than up here, and Omicron is more up here.
Which is why it's spreadable, because it's up here.
Well, that's a good question. Excellent question, because everybody thought, well, must be, so Delta, I don't know. So Delta was a big deal because you all heard of the R naught, which is the ability of a virus to spread to other people for longer. So if one person can spread to 2, that's an R naught of 2. Okay. If one person can spread to 4, that's an R naught of 4. Okay. Delta, we think went as high as about 8. Okay. And measles is 12. That's one of the highest. Flu is usually around 8 or so. One or more Delta. Omicron seems a little bit worse. So it must be. And Delta, one of the reasons it was worse was because there were a lot more particles being spewed out in those little those little droplets, right? Like 1,000 times more than the ancestral strain. 1,000 times more. We thought, well, Omicron must be even worse, right? Because it's spreading even more. Turns out it's not. If you look at the droplets and the variances of people, the numbers are not high, and not even as high as Delta. So what the heck is going on? I think what they're coming to is probably its immune escape. Is why. And immune escape is this thing where it's not being affected as much by the antibodies. So it overrides our immune systems more easily than did the previous versions. And that's where its advantage is. The other reason I put this up there was again, thinking in terms of probabilities, right? So in other words, the more people that are becoming positive on a daily basis in Warren County would indicate there are more people around. Remember, most people spew the virus out a day or 2 before they get symptoms. That's really where COVID is so good, because if you're going to design a virus that wants to replicate itself, you of course want to design it to replicate before people know what happened, right? Because they won't quarantine. So they'll just be out there. So Omicron and all of them are very good at spreading in that day or 2 before you get symptoms. Okay. So you have to think about what's the probability when the numbers are high in your area of someone in this room has it and is already spewing out these little things all over the room. And what can you do about it? Okay, So outside, inside, of course, makes a difference, right? Ventilation makes a difference. What do you think so ventilation makes a difference. The more you can move air through a building's room, if you're in a community like we are right now in this room, the better the air is either filtered or moved outside, the faster the better. Because it's clearing those viruses that are sitting there, those little tiny micro droplets waiting to find someone. I did try to find out what the air exchange rate was here, but no one knows. And I don't think we have up with that. So it's working out better. But that's, so ventilation is one of the keys on indoor or the outside, right? These are the recommendations from the basically the Society of Heating and Air Conditioning Engineers. Offices 2 to 3 exchanges per hour, schools 5 to 6. That's a 30 by 30 room. Or you can see what the recommendations are. So that is one way to mitigate. Okay. So you can see anyway, you want to move from the right to the left down the curve, and this is showing you that little thing at the top is covered it. But basically, ventilation gets you part way, mass gets you part way, and duration, time, of course, again, it's probabilistic. So the more time to contact, the more the higher the chance you might get it.
Can you help explain the mask? There's still some.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. Activities matter. Silent, speaking, shouting, singing, heavy exercise. You can see it gets redder and redder as you go down that list. And then face coverings, but we're going to talk a little more about it. So bottom line, silent, you're still breathing outside. Speaking, but you know, you heard some of the stuff about singers and all that. Okay, mask. This is the latest I could find. This is a study done relatively recently. Blue is Delta, red is Omicron, and the effectiveness of masks over a period, I think it was over a 20-minute exposure period at close proximity. In other words, 2 people talking right next to each other. And so bottom line, yeah, okay, I'll show you. You all know what the mask looks like. I'll show you what we no, so this cloth, which isn't even on this, it's up there. Surgical mask, right? Our loop surgical mask. That's the blue. Okay. And you do have some infection. And then after that, 2 is a can, that is an the red one up there is unfitted, green is fitted, meaning you're really fitted around the nose, not the feet. Okay. And those numbers are the percent possibility of infection as you run down. So obviously you want to be in the lower left. Right? So that's the fitted N95. Now at the hospital, and because we go into COVID rooms all the time, right? So I've been in COVID rooms at times. And so I know the air in the room, even though we have air exchange, you know, it's negative pressure, maybe we're still going to have a high viral concentration. These are fitted to my, this one's fitted to my face. This is my size. So I have it on, I've got this, there's no air. It's all through the N95. And then we also wear eye protection because it turns out it can, we think, still get into the eye which memories when someone's talking like that. That does work well. I've been doing this for 2 years now in COVID, almost 2 years. I've been in so many COVID patient rooms, I can't remember. So obviously it works.
Does it work when you spread it, or does it work when you?
Good point. Another good point. Another good question. Yeah, that's it. That's a good, because for the best mask, the fitted N95, it works both ways well. But for certain, say surgical and special cloth, it matters more on the person that has the has COVID. Because there it's going to be held in, right? It's going to knock plume out. It's going to be held in more. Even if there's a leakage, it's going to be held in more. Whereas the person that's breathing in and doesn't have it, you still get those particles around the side of the mask. So, I mean, I think this is the best I've seen in terms of illustrating the differences and how it does impact your ability to get infected.
What's the difference between like the 4.2 and the 0.64? What are those, what are the numbers mean?
That's the probability of infection at 20 time. So it drops, so 10.4% to 4.2. The blue is delta, the red is Omicron.
Or what is the, what's the 0.64? What's happening in that? The second thing over.
Oh, so 0.64% chance of acquiring delta. I think that for the mass combination.
Well, what is that? What is that?
Oh, so look up, so red is not fitted, but N95, and green is fitted.
So what that's saying is that the N95 is more effective than wearing a surgical and an N95?
So let's just take infected subject. Infected wears. You see, that's the probability on that combination. So they try to work out all the different combinations. to come up with your standard next to somebody.
So what's the very fun or, you know, you can go in a restaurant, as long as you're sipping water, you don't have to swear. But then.
Well, yeah, so let's, you know, when you're eating, you're not in the COVID-free zone. There is no such thing. I'm sorry. Again, it's time to contact, right? So, you know, if you go in the building, you're wearing it, you know, you go and you sit down, then you take it off and eat. Well, while you're taking it off and eating, and there's other people near you, you're exposed. But maybe you only take 15 minutes, you hit 20. So you know, it's probabilities. I mean, you take some risk when you take it off. If you're gonna eat in a restaurant with people, yeah, you take some risk. How much risk that is depends on all the things we just talked about. How prevalent it is in the community. You know, how much time, how close, how much are you talking or not talking? Like you said, you're sipping water, or you're putting out less than you're talking probably. You know. Oh, sorry.
No worries. So one of the things I found interesting, during the holidays, obviously people were gathering more, and like I mentioned earlier, that there's that 1 to 2 days before you start showing symptoms where you're infectious. So how does it work, like, in a family? So a bunch of us got COVID from, that was, you know, let's say at Christmas, but my mom has had it, that's positive, my father has it negative, but they both didn't really still have any symptoms, they have been boosted, so how does that kind of work? Like, I think you were gonna say something about asymptomatic earlier, but.
Yeah, so we're gonna we'll talk a little more about boost vaccines too. We'll get to that to talking about, because with Omicron, it has changed the calculus, because people even that are vaccine and boosted are still getting it. They're just not taking it seriously. And I'm sure there are people out there that just don't get symptoms, that have had, they didn't boost it, and they're still gonna get and potentially spread Omicron, but don't get symptoms, or they get very mild symptoms. It has changed things, you know, Omicron has really changed. This is just another one that I go through these. Vaccines. So the development of both the lipid envelope and the mRNA vaccines has been a 30-year process, actually, since the early 1960s. As you can see there, 2014, they were already formulating it for clinical trials in cancer in terms of the vaccine technology. Okay, I just want to give you some perspective on how long they've been working on this. Okay, so so the vaccines go after this, the blue thing, that's the spike protein. Okay. It's a big protein, and that's where all the mutations come from, right? These are the current fully vaccinated groups in the United States as of January 20th by age group. Just to give you a snapshot of where we're at. And this is so-called weak immunity. right? It turns out that when we got our vaccines back whenever, that immunity started to wane. And that's the reason for the boosters, right? And you can see by Moderna seemed to go down the least, Pfizer next, and of course the other two they'll start out as high anyway. But they all degrade over time in terms of our immune response to the virus. Just another way of looking at it, and how many months after the vaccine, and the probability of being able to again spread virus. And how much the booster does. So that's a wane person in the middle, and then they get boosted 2 months later, and that's their effectiveness at hospital. Look on the left, hospitalizations. So staying out of the hospital. Same kind of thing what the booster does in terms of decreasing the risk. And again, vaccine is effectiveness over time, look at the changes in the booster. The booster changes, one of the reasons that it appears to make such a difference, especially with Omicron. Remember I talked about how the spike protein in Omicron is evading the antibodies? Turns out there's another part to immunity, there's what's called the T cells. T cells have a little broader function than antibodies. In other words, they can branch out. It turns out the booster has a much bigger effect on T cell immunity than the first vaccine doses. But for some reason, this third dose brings out the T cells. And they are able to fight Omicron better.
So does the boost of those T cells potentially mean that we'll need less boosters in the future?
Hard to say at this point. Hard to predict. That we'll talk a little bit about one time, and then we'll talk a little bit about this. Again, I'm back to in terms of, this is just rates in nursing homes. Look how the rate stayed down. Those that got boosted. Now these are nursing home patients, so elderly, debilitated, right? So obviously, it makes a big difference if the vaccine boosters. This is death rate by vaccination status in Chile, where we got this data. A big difference. Now, but are there problems with vaccine? Sure there are. Right? We've all heard of the heart effects, right? So this is a thing on myocarditis, pericarditis, cardiac arrhythmias with both COVID patients and vaccine. These are for, as I recall, either a million illnesses or a million vaccinations. Okay. Note that the one that I want to point out is the one in the second from the left, the orange bar, which is the vaccination bar, at 15 per million for, and again, I'm sorry, the population is shot. These are less than 4 years old. And it turns out that the Moderna, that's Moderna, the second dose of Moderna in young boys has the highest risk of myocarditis in vaccination. Slightly more than what it shows there on actually getting COVID. Now, of course, COVID also causes pericarditis, cardiac arrhythmias, and shit on the stomach. But just to let you know, there are side effects. So that's part of it. There are side effects. They're tiny. Last thing I heard on the pediatric group was one other statistic I heard was out of 9 million vaccinations, there were 12 cases of myocarditis. This is showing where we currently are in the U.S. vaccination. We are better than Russia. And this is the booster rate. We're kind of low on this. We're kind of low. And this shows you what a better vaccinated country. This is patients in the ICU. From the United States, certainly. So United Kingdom did see a rise for Omicron, but not really what we want. They do have a higher vaccination industry. And hospitalization. So just more and more that vaccination and boosters matter for severe disease. For severe disease. Again, against hospitalization, it may not be that the fourth, Israel is trying to force dose. It's not clear it's going to help a whole lot. So here's the third dose does help a whole lot. It's not clear the fourth is, at least not in the short term. So just more about the third shot. Just want to show that this is, so patient on the left, 52-year-old male, unvaccinated, a few days into a severe COVID illness. Patient on the right, 48-year-old male, vaccinated and boosted. About 2 or 3 days into their COVID illness or cough, not having to be in the hospital. It's still a serious disease. Right now, it's a serious disease for the unvaccinated. Okay, so what other treatments do we have? So the big one. So first of all, let's talk about monoclonal antibodies, right? That's been the mainstay. Omicron is changing. There's only one now, so Trovimab, that still works. All the other ones, I'm sorry, they don't work. So Omicron is the and the big thing right now is Paxlovid. That's the Pfizer drug. You all heard of that, right? Okay. This is what it does. When the virus comes into the cell, it delivers this to mRNA, and the idea of mRNA is now to make proteins that will help the virus make more copies of itself, get out of the cell, go on and get somebody else. A really important part of that is that bottom left M-pro, main protease. Okay. Paxlovid inhibits that. Right. It can block it to a significant degree. It turns out now, this is another concept. The spike protein, we know all those mutations. M-pro. Omicron's M-pro versus the ancestral strain, one mutation. The whole protein, only one mutation. Why would that be? Why do you think? Because that protein can't change to work. It just can't change. So the virus has to conserve it. Any virus that makes it be better, has to have a good functioning M-pro. Can't change that one. If it got too many mutations, that one's not gonna work. So that Paxlovid targets that. It means that future variations probably will still have that. And that's really good. Does that mean, and this is important because it decreases viral load within a couple of days of taking it, 90%. It decreases hospitalizations, 90%. It decreases ICU days, ICU stays, 90%. This is a big deal. I mean, it's a game changer.
How quickly does the patient have to get that in their system for it to
We
be?
might get it in the first 2 days. Get going on before they get too sick. And then finally, testing, PCR, you know about, that's the one that's the mainstay, right? That's the application test. Question is, where does antigen testing fit, right? This is the profile of when you get an infection. That's the code, that's the viral RNA, which obviously leads to symptoms. The viral antigens, when you have symptoms, that's when that test is going to turn positive, the home test. Okay. But it won't test, it has to have a certain viral load to turn positive. And so there's about 15% false negatives. And that's the problem, right? It's good, it's cheap to do at home, but it does have 15% false negatives. So the question is how to use it. You know, I think it's extremely useful because it's something you can do at home. So the most useful case, you start developing symptoms, want to know if it's cold or not. If it's positive, you know you've got COVID. If it's negative, you can't touch it. But if it's positive, you know it's cold. Okay. And then the other thing where I think it could be useful is, again, this comes down to how do we, you know, they're saying, okay, you can go back to doing these 5 days, right? You know, this is the recommendation. At 5 days, 30% are still spread. So taking the test at 5 days out, just before you come back, And actually, the best is take 2 test days in a row. It won't take.
Oh, I didn't quite hear that.
So the test, you know, right now they're saying, well, you can go back to your activity or whatever in 5 days, right? CDC. It turns out it's probably better if you wait 5 days to do the test, the home test. If it's negative, great, take it 1 more day. If it's negative 2 days in a row, you're probably pretty darn good. And they have a very low rate of spreading the virus. But like I said, if you don't do the test and you just go back to 5 days, there's still a 30% chance you can spread the virus.
What about natural immunity? I had COVID.
Yeah, so I mean, that also degrades over time. But it is immunity. It's somewhat like being vaccinated. And if you've had 2 vaccinations, get COVID, it's kind of like being boosted. But even that immunity does degrade over time. And that immunity, which is based on the antibodies a lot, is also compounded by the extent that though that you say you got COVID after you had the vaccine, you're still going to get T cell effects. And so yes, you're still going to be better. You're still going to be better at not getting in the hospital, not going in the ICU, not getting sick.
So I think you touched on the pill for the virus.
Yeah.
Is that going to be what we do in the future?
Yeah, I think if you're anybody, if you're older, if you've got comorbidities and you know you've got COVID and you're a day or 2 into it, I wouldn't want to pay the bills. There are 2 pharmacies. They're in the pharmacies, but they're in short supply right now. And one of the reasons they're in short supply, where do you think some of the compounds come from that make that pill?
China?
That's right.
Now, you think we'll still have boosters in the future?
Yes. And I think we'll probably have something like, my guess is something, that's about the future. What's going to happen? So my guess is probably a yearly thing, probably like the flu. But no one knows what's going to happen. Truly, no one knows what's going to happen. Will there be more variants like Omicron that are even better? I don't know. You know, one of the problems is, how does a variant come about? It comes about through evolution of the virus. What does the virus need for evolution? Lots of people being infected. Well, there's lots of people being infected right now. So that virus is tooling away in all those people trying to find its way out into a better state. Trying to figure out, how do I get even better? I mean, that's the way to think of this. The virus is out there thinking, how do I get better?
Just, and I don't want to sound antagonistic on this question, but isn't a virus's ultimate objective is to survive though? So it does not want to kill its host.
Right, absolutely.
So it's going to
That's
try
what's
to,
not good for the virus.
yeah.
Right.
So it's going to weaken itself so you don't die, but you might be sick.
Right. The best virus is the one that can spread pre-symptomatically or even asymptomatically. Really, they think about it, but that's the way it's going to spread.
So is it?
So will it go that direction? Will it become another cold? You know, maybe. Will it become like RSV where it's the kids that are at risk because they're not immunized yet? So little kids are going to be the ones at risk, maybe. Other coronaviruses like cold. Will it become another flu? Maybe. Or something unique. We don't know. They're all potential.
Do you think that the variants of cholera will be similar to the flu, will be a random shot for everyone?
Yeah, I think that's a likely outcome. Probably. We don't know. But yes, it could be like another flu and you get a shot every year. You know, Moderna has already talked about they're going to package. One of the neat things about the mRNA technology that can be used for other vaccines as well, flu, malaria, which would be really cool. So there are other potential uses for this mRNA technology now that they've worked on it so well. So yeah, it's possible we'll get that one of the options will be a flu shot with everything. COVID, the whole thing. Once a year. One more thing. There's the potential for what's called the dream vaccine for COVID. Notice we've been doing this, the spike protein changes, right? Changes often. It's not conserved, in other words, can change. But there are parts of the virus that are conserved. And the idea is to develop a vaccine against those so that it's effective no matter what the variant is, even future. So that's another arm of research right now.
can you share your presentation?
Sure.
It'll be on our,
Yeah, I can, if you want to, if you give me send me your email address,
Well, I
I'll
mean, I
email.
think that that's really great information.
Yeah, I'll email it to you if you want to send me your, yeah,
Thank
let me know. Okay,
Bob, one
Thanks.
question.
Yeah.
When you, I've gotten the booster, all three of them, and each time I've been in bed for 2 days. And I know
yeah,
you
so
don't,
there is that too, isn't there?
you don't get the virus, they say from it.
Yeah, I
So
hear
what's
you.
going on with that?
Yeah, because it's taking your immune system, right? And if your immune system overreacts in certain ways and all that, my son was like that, after getting the second one. Yeah, it does that. But I didn't feel anything from it. I don't know if that means that my immune system does.
I know.
So,
I need
but yes, you're right. They can lay you up for it here, so.
he has to go.
I have a
An
case more
operator.
that they can only, but this, I said, if you're gonna have both, I gotta do the you know, so the patient was okay with it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I think that's it. I think we can, again, Rick, it will be on our order YouTube channel. But I'll try and get it from Bob and send it out.
Yeah, and send me,
I'll get it.
and I can send it to you or whatever.
Okay, let's stand for the board like that. Fire them off.
Things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, is it beneficial to all concerned?
Have a great weekend.